Deep beneath the forest floor where no light ever touched the roots of trees, an ancient secret stirred. When a young explorer named Cade stumbled upon a fossil larger than anything recorded, his heart pounded with wonder. The bones whispered a time before mankind, when giants ruled the land. But what Cade didn't know was that this discovery would awaken more than curiosity. The earth held memories, and not all of them slept peacefully. As storm clouds gathered above and strange tremors shook the valley, Cade realized the Cedosaurus was not just a fossil. It was a warning. The valley was silent in a way that felt unnatural. Birds often filled the canopy with their cries, and insects buzzed in endless patterns, but on that day the air hung thick with stillness. Cade stood at the edge of a narrow ravine, his boots sinking into the damp soil. He had spent months combing this part of the forest, driven by stories passed down through generations. The elders spoke of giants that once walked the land, creatures so massive the ground trembled with their steps. Most dismissed the tales as legend, but Cade believed there was truth buried beneath. He was not a trained scientist, nor an expert in ancient life. He was an orphan raised on stories and scraps of maps left behind by a grandfather who vanished in the same forest decades ago. All he had was a journal bound in cracked leather, its pages filled with drawings and cryptic notes. A spiral symbol repeated on nearly every page burned itself into his thoughts. He followed it like a compass, trusting it to guide him where logic could not. Each morning he woke before the sun. Each night he slept with his ear to the earth, listening, waiting, hoping. Then the earth shifted. A quake not strong enough to destroy, but deep enough to disturb. Trees bent with strange groan, as though something massive turned below them. Cade rushed toward the source, heart thudding in his chest. He didn't know what he expected to find. Maybe more stones or a collapsed cave. What he found instead was bone, long curved ancient bone, so large it looked like part of a bridge carved from ivory. Cade fell to his knees, brushing away the dirt with trembling hands. It was real. The stories were real. And this was only the beginning. The bones stretched far beyond what Cade first uncovered. He marked the shape, carefully using stones and twigs to outline each segment. The rib cage alone spanned nearly 20 feet, and it curved into the earth like the hull of a buried ship. He returned for 3 days, bringing tool supplies and a lantern powered by the sun. Every stroke of his brush revealed more of the creature, and every layer unearthed something deeper inside him, a connection to the past he never understood. The journal offered more than just sketches. Between its pages were riddles and coded directions. Some entries spoke of a spine of stone and a throat of light beneath the beast. Cade studied them at night beside the fossil firelight, casting shadows across the bones. He had the feeling that the creature was not merely dead, but resting, watching, waiting. By the 7th day, rain fell in thick sheets. Cade built a tarp shelter above the dig site and kept working. Water pooled around the exposed skeleton, forming mirror-like puddles that reflected the trees above. In one of those reflections, Cade saw something strange, an image that wasn't there when he looked directly. A second shape near the bones, low to the ground with eyes like molten stone. He spun but saw nothing, only trees swaying in the storm. But the feeling stayed with him like a weight pressing against his spine. That night the earth shook again, louder, deeper. This time the bones shifted. Cade heard it clearly, a hollow sound like breath drawn through ancient lungs. The journal had warned him. The words returned like echoes from forgotten cave. Disturb not the first colossus, for it remembers its fall. Fear crept in, but he could not stop. He followed the markings leading farther into the earth through a narrow crack in the stone wall behind the rib cage. It opened into a hidden cavern where light filtered down through quartz veins in the ceiling. In the center lay something impossible, a stone heart the size of a cart still pulsing with a faint inner glow. Cade approached slowly, drawn by the rhythm of its beat. He touched it, and the chamber lit up. Images flashed in his mind. Lush jungles, thunderous herds, beasts with long necks that moved like rivers, and a Cedosaurus standing high above them, all crowned in mist. He saw a world before memory, a land ruled not by time, but by presence. The stone heart knew him. He stumbled back, breath caught in his throat. The journal slipped from his hand and landed near the base of the glowing core. The spiral symbol on its cover shimmered, and the heart responded with a deeper beat. The cavern walls trembled and a path opened behind him, revealing stairs cut into living rock. This was no natural formation. Someone had built it. Someone who knew the Cetiosaurus. Someone who feared its return. As Cade stepped forward, wind rushed through the tunnel, though there was no source. The air whispered his name, not in a voice, but in feeling. He was chosen, and the awakening had begun. The stairs led Cade deeper into the earth, where the light of the stone heart faded behind him. The tunnel walls grew warmer, as if the stone itself breathed. Faint carvings lined the path. Scenes of towering beast herds crossing rivers, forests, rising and falling under skies filled with fire. In the final carving, the Cetiosaurus stood alone, its neck raised toward stars as a shadow descended from above. Cade reached the bottom and entered a circular chamber unlike anything he had seen. The walls pulsed with faint gold veins like blood vessels, and in the center stood a massive arch grown from the rock itself. Beneath it rested a stone altar, and on that altar lay a second heart, this one cracked and dark. He stepped closer, and the arch shimmered. A memory not his own filled the chamber. He saw the world as it was millions of years before. Herds of Cetosauruses moved across green plains that stretched forever. Volcanoes rumbled in the distance, and skies swirled with colors now lost time. The Cetiosaurus was not just an animal. It was a guardian. It carried memory in its blood, memory of a world before humans, before language. But something had come from beyond the sky, a darkness not born of earth. It poisoned the rivers, blackened the trees, and turned the wind to ash. In the final moments, the largest of the Cetosauruses gave its heart, willingly sealing it within the stone to trap the corruption below. The spiral was the key, a pattern of balance that kept the gate closed. And Cade had opened it. He felt his knees, heart pounding. The cracks in the second heart deepened, and the air grew colder. Whispers began to echo in the chamber, words from no tongue he knew yet somehow understood. They promised power, knowledge, dominion over the forgotten. He backed away, but the altar pulsed. Then he saw the shadow again, not a creature, but a presence. It rose like smoke from the cracks in the stone heart, swirling around the chamber. The arch responded, glowing with pale light. Cade reached for the journal. He flipped to the last page, the one he had never dared read. It held only one sentence. The beast may sleep, but the memory breathes. The bones above the chamber shifted again. A low groan rumbled from the earth, and the Cetiosaurus began to rise. Not fully living, not fully dead. Awakened by blood memory and the broken seal. Cade ran to the tunnel, but the forest above had changed. Trees bent away from the dig site, and birds flew in silent patterns. The earth cracked beneath his feet as the ribcage split open, and a massive head emerged, eyes glowing with ancient light. It looked at him, and he understood. This was not an attack. It was a message. The Cetiosaurus remembered everything. It rose fully from the soil, taller than the trees, neck sweeping across the valley like a river reborn. Beneath its feet, the shadow poured like oil, spreading in tendrils toward the horizon. Cade had to choose. Let the beast return to stone and seal the darkness again, or guide it into a world that had forgotten what it once owed to giants. He stepped forward, heart racing. The spiral on the journal burned against his skin. The Cetiosaurus waited, and the world held its breath. The storm had passed, but the sky remained silent. Clouds hung still above the valley, their undersides tinged with an unnatural hue. The Cetiosaurus stood motionless at the center of the dig site, its breath slow and heavy like wind through a canyon. Around it the earth had cracked in a perfect ring. Nothing moved. No birds. No wind. Only the hum of power pulsing through the stone beneath Cade's feet. He clutched the journal to his chest, eyes locked on the ancient giant. The shadow had not vanished. It lingered at the edges of the valley, crawling like mist into cracks and roots. Trees that touched it, withered leaves shriveling to dust. The world did not understand what had awakened, but something primal deep in the land remembered. Cade turned to flee, but the Cetiosaurus lowered its head. Its glowing eyes met his, and he stopped. A voice entered his thoughts. Not words, but emotion. Memory. A question. Why wake me if you fear what follows? He stepped forward slowly, unsure if he moved by choice or invitation. The journal opened in his hands, though he had not touched the cover. The spiral glowed and pages turned, as if caught in a breeze, only they could feel. New markings appeared, ones he had never seen before. They showed a path beyond the forest where ancient stones formed a circle older than any ruin known to man. The voice returned softer now, but deeper. There is a second gate. The seal is broken. Balance must return. Cade understood what had to be done. The Cedosaurus was not meant to fight the darkness alone. It was a key to guide a vessel of memory. The real danger had always been what lay behind the gate. The corrupted force that had nearly ended life once before was leaking into the present. And it would not stop. The Cedosaurus took its first steps beyond the valley. The ground shook with each move, but not with violence, with weight and purpose. Trees parted, stones split, and the ancient path revealed itself once more. Cade followed. They traveled through forgotten places where no roads reached. Mountains bowed in the distance, and rivers quieted at their passing. At night the stars shifted overhead, forming shapes long erased from maps. Cade began to see the world as it once was, not in vision, but in feeling. The land remembered. It had always remembered. They reached the stone circle at dawn. The second gate stood silent, cracked, waiting. The Cedosaurus lowered its head, and the spiral on Cade's journal flared with light. Symbols burned into the stone around the circle, matching those from the carvings in the cavern. As he stepped inside the circle, the air thickened. The shadow returned faster, now stronger fed by its growing reach. Cade raised the journal. The pages flipped wildly, and the light intensified. The Cedosaurus let out a deep echoing call that rolled across the mountains like thunder. The gate began to close, but the shadow fought back. It screamed without sound and struck the circle with black tendrils. The Cedosaurus stepped forward and placed its foot upon the final symbol. Light exploded from the circle, and the shadow wailed as it was dragged inward, bound by memories sealed by will. The earth went still. The wind returned. The sky cleared, and the giant lowered its head once more. The light faded from the stone circle, and silence returned. Not the empty silence from before, but a peaceful one filled with stillness that breathed. The Cedosaurus stepped back from the gate, its form dimming with each slow movement. Cracks appeared along its body, not pain, but a release, as if stone returned to stone and memory to rest. Cade dropped to his knees, breath slow, mind heavy. The journal had turned to ash in his hands, its purpose fulfilled. Only the spiral remained etched into the soil, beneath him a perfect shape, that pulsed once before fading into the earth. The Cedosaurus looked at him one last time. No words, no sound, only knowing. Then it stepped into the light and vanished, dissolved not into dust, but into presence, returned to a world that birthed it and the balance it had protected. Cade sat for a long time watching the circle grow still. When he finally stood, the forest felt different, brighter, lighter. The weight had lifted, but the memory remained. Birds returned to the trees, and the wind carried the scent of rain. The path home revealed itself in ways he hadn't noticed before. Stones marked by ancient footprints, trails shaped not by man, but by time. When he walked out of the forest days later, the world had not changed, but he carried no proof, no bones, no images, only memory. But that was enough. He returned to the village where the elders listened in silence to every word he shared. None doubted him. They had always known something slept beneath the trees. Cade's voice joined theirs in stories told by firelight under stars that now felt closer. He became a guide, not just through the forest, but through time, a reminder that the earth remembers. That balance must be kept, and that deep below where the soil runs cold a guardian waits, not as a beast, not as a legend, but as memory. And memory never dies.